Hi, everyone. So thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, just to introduce myself very quickly. My name is Ling Chen. I am originally from China. So yeah, expat here. But I'm a longtime member of Women in Product community and so grateful for Yardley and other female product leaders has built for this community. So I'm really thrilled to, do this virtual hangout with Yardley today. So just some housekeeping because we have so many people in the room. So if you don't mind, maybe just mute yourself, but feel free to, introduce yourself. Some of what help are you looking for? Where do you come from in the chat room? And then also feel free to ask questions that you'd love us to cover also in the chat room. So we'll make sure that we leave enough time to cover that. As you know, this is a very, very challenging time for everyone, as Yardley said, specifically for moms, all of a sudden we have like 2 full-time jobs or 3 full-time jobs. So we just really wanted to use this time to hang out and then see what the community needs and how can we support each other in this very vulnerable time. Yeah.
Okay, great. And let me just quickly introduce myself. I thank you for joining. I've been in tech and operating for about 20 years. I'm a co-founder and board member for Women in Product. So I'm really, really, really passionate about this community. I've worked in a variety of different roles in engineering, PM, general management. So happy to talk about career transitions. I've also worked in non-tech companies as well. So like for those of you, if you're like not in tech, I'm happy to cover that section as well. I worked at Dun Bradstreet for 3 years, which was like a 100-year-old company. And I use tech to disrupt the company and business. And I think that's really relevant as we think about product. Not only thinking about end users and or the business, but thinking about like industries and how particularly we could innovate, especially in seemingly stale industries. In my experience, risk management, real estate, or healthcare, and how to leverage our own superpowers and technology to be able to do that. I'm a mother of 2 young boys, 2 and 5. I switched jobs each time I was on maternity or after maternity. So for those who are thinking about starting families and navigating careers, happy to talk about that as well. I had alluded to having a very strong family network. I have like 5 brothers and sisters, very global, but I think the key is also having really great like network of friends that challenge me outside of work, to be able to focus on self-care, hold each other accountable to life goals, especially during these challenging times. In fact, I just got off a virtual hangout with some friends and people I've networked with over the years just to, check in with each other. Nothing formal. So networking is very important. I would also say I've recently been working on my own for the last 6 months. So I stepped out from being a full-time operator and advising consulting on my own for the first time in my life. And I've enjoyed the transition, but it is, it has pros and cons. And I'm working with a variety of different startups. I would say Series B to companies almost going IPO, around like product strategy, go to market, thinking about any sort of BD partnerships that needs to happen. And then for companies that are getting ready to go public, what does that look like? And my angel investing is usually to C to Series A. So hopefully this gives a little bit of breadth in my background that's like outside of what's on paper to think about questions to ask. And I'll try to cover as much as I can do in this conversation.
Wow, we've already got a lot of questions in the chat room.
Yeah.
So before we get into those, Yardley, maybe you can share a little bit with us about some of the pivotal moments in your journey that shaped who you are today.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I would say looking back, particularly on my career, some of the pivotal moments were One, when I was leaving Agilent Technologies, which was my first job out of college, I had been there for 3 years working on like new products, which I actually really enjoyed and loved. Making spectrum analyzers. Sounds geeky, but it was really fun. Like our end user government and mobile companies using our testing measurement equipment. And I actually left the job without a job because of family reasons. I wanted to relocate back to where my mom lived and help support her through some transition times in her life. And I, at that point, was like, 24, 25. And I remember seeing a job that I really wanted at a job post, which was at Apple. Back then, this was before Apple was cool. This was like before iPhone, iPad, before even like Mac OS. It was just, nobody really knew much about Apple except for like computers that they had at the time that were very old school. And I saw this job posting and remember that I was not qualified for the job. They were looking for a pretty seasoned engineer. And I felt like, well, what do I have to lose if I just apply to it?
Yeah.
And I did. I did spend time extensively writing in the cover letter about how much I wanted to learn, how I thought that this would be a great company for me to join. And to my surprise, I actually got a call to meet with the hiring manager. And I remember showing up at the lobby and I didn't even know how to use the mouse. At that time, like the mouse for the Apple computer was only like one click. There was no like left, right click. I had always used PCs.
Yeah.
And so, I was really embarrassed going into the interview. And, I ended up landing a job at Apple Computers working on new products. And he ended up carving a role for me, even though I was like super junior. And I share that experience in great detail in that, one, the uncertainty is true when you're a little bit like scared about cold reaching out to opportunities that you might not be qualified for. But I don't think that we should hold ourselves short or like sell ourselves short. We should definitely try our best. And I think me spending time in the cover letter at that moment in time really made a difference to the hiring manager to even just have a conversation with me, just trying to get through that door. And I think that experience has struck with me ever since. So if you look at my career, like it's not very straightforward. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, and there've been failures and there've been rejections that are not highlighted. I think just taking that chance and not being afraid to reach out cold or like having someone reject you, like you kind of got to get over that somehow to be able to move forward. And I think secondly, like I remember that moment of not being able to use the mouse and how embarrassed I was. And I could have let it really shaking me up for the rest of the interview, but instead I was like, forget it. I'm sure like he doesn't know something either. And just having that mentality of you can be like super embarrassed or like feeling like shaken inside, but like just trying to hold it together to go through the rest of the interview process. And then reframing your mind to think about like, hey, whoever's interviewing me, how badly I want this job, they're human beings too. And they're also going to be making mistakes. And if, and just having that mindset, I think is really important. And I also feel like it's something that has struck with me, like, ever since, like, even if there are uncertain moments in my life, I'm okay with that. Or if I'm like scared about facing a certain challenge, for instance, public speaking, I never thought I was ever going to do that. Even though I have an extroverted personality, but it's just putting in a mindset that people are people. It doesn't matter who, no matter how successful they are, everyone has their weaknesses and everyone has their like downfalls, and putting that mindset, then you're no longer as nervous because ultimately at the end of the day, we're all just human beings and all very vulnerable. So then the second pivotal point, I think, in my career that I wanted to share was like returning to work and then choosing to have a new job after having a baby. I think a lot of advice that women have like asked me for is this pivotal moment in their life, thinking about starting a family or returning to work after having a baby, how to navigate career and not trying to let something, fall.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I remember when Arianna, well, actually, maybe like let's share the first experience first. So when Zillow approached me to join Trulia, after Zillow had acquired Trulia. So I was at Trulia for a long time. I joined when it was 100 people. We went public, grew to 1,300 people. I left, and then Zillow acquired Trulia. Um, and the Zillow had asked me to come back to Trulia to run the rentals business.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, I was working for Yahoo. Marissa just joined. It was like a really great time to join. They were hiring really good people. I
Mm-hmm.
actually loved my job. I was able to do BD as a product person, which like is very hard to find. So being out there striking deals as a product
Mm-hmm.
expert, I loved it. It was really fun. And I just had my first son, and I was really nervous about going and about exploring a new opportunity. And at the same time, my husband got a new job as well. And so
Mm-hmm.
there were all these external factors on paper that, you know, realistically, I could say, hey, I'm not going to even explore this job opportunity to go
Yeah.
back, or especially in a, very like much changed environment and uphill battles. Um, but I felt like, what is the worst case that could happen? Like, oftentimes this is like the mindset that I go into situations with, and it's not to be pessimistic. It's to just be realistic with myself. Like, what is the worst case scenario, and can I face that?
Mm-hmm.
And how would I face that? And so at that point, when I thought about this, it's like, okay, so worst case scenario is that I am going to be a bad mother to my baby because I am like working all the time around the clock to fulfill this new job and setting expectations. But then really, like, is that really going to happen? I'm sure I'm going to be more in tune with myself, and like my mom or others will tell me. And so like, let's not worry about that. And then secondly, it's like, how do I set expectations with my new job that I'm a new mom? Like, how transparent should I be about my family needs? When should I talk about that? And I think that is like, because the worst case scenario is that the new job expects me to be in the office like 12 hours a day. And then I
Mm-hmm.
have no flexibility and I can't go back and see my family. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that to me was like, would be the worst case scenario, or one of the worst case scenarios. And so I try to be pretty upfront with the company about it. And I ultimately felt that, looking back, that was the right call.
Mm-hmm.
If you're exploring new opportunities, I don't think that it should be something that's hidden until you get your offer and then try to talk about the details. Try to
Mm-hmm.
be transparent upfront about your priorities. I think people tend to respect that. And
Mm-hmm.
once I started the new role, I was very transparent and on my calendar about like, when I needed to pump, or like when I needed to leave home and like leave work and be home earlier. I think setting expectations is really key.
Awesome.
So
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I see a lot of questions actually surrounding job search. Yeah, it's a very challenging time. People
yeah.
are experiencing layoff or even pay cuts. So I'm sure many of maybe the women product members are going through a job search. What advice do you have for women who are in this journey right now in terms of finding that, great workplace? It's really, really hard, because there's so many things to consider. What are the criteria or attributes that you considered when making trying to find a new job?
Yeah, I mean, I think let's talk about in general, like sense, and then hone in on this like situation and the climate we're in. I
Mm-hmm.
think the job search process, one, is about really understanding what you want next in your career. Rather, it's like skills that you're looking to learn, industries you want to be in, or even like people you want to be around.
Mm-hmm.
There are many different factors, but having a really clear, just like you would with any product that you're building, having clear requirements,
Mm-hmm.
on what you're looking for, I think it's key. And you can even knock them down to like P0s to P2s and do something like that as if you're doing like a product requirements like gathering process for yourself, and being honest with that. I think it's important. I mean, because ultimately there are certain factors that are always going to be important, like pay, location, like sure, but like how important those things relative to other things, it's like how you need to holistically look at it. So if you're like starting from the beginning, I would just like write down everything that you can think of and then just try to prioritize it and just keep yourself honest, as you're going through the interview process and job search process. I think that would be really helpful. And that's not only helpful for yourself, but it's also helpful when you tap your network for help. Because oftentimes when you're asking people for help, and you can be very specific if you really, really know what you want about like, hey, I just want introduction to this company. But sometimes you're like a little bit more open and vague, then you're able to say, well, these are the things that are really important to me. And that's really then helpful for people to help look for jobs for you as well. I would say then the second thing is, how are you thinking about the timing, right, of this job search? Like, are you thinking like, okay, I'm in a position that I need to be securing a job in next month, versus like, I think I'll probably want to look for something in the next 6 to 9 months. And being honest with yourself about the timing is also important. Especially in the latter situation. Oftentimes when people think like, I don't have to worry about it now. Like I'm like happy with my job. I'll worry about like 6 to 9 months from now. If you think that there's any possibility where you're going to want to be looking for a new job and land a new job in 6 to 9 months, you need to be starting to do that work now to like really land a job that you want and that you love, and that's going to work out. I want to make sure that you have the runway and the time to think about it. It's not like you have to fully dedicate like 50% of your time to it, but start planning now is really critical, because those months can fly by in a hurry. And then you might be in a situation where you're like, okay, now I need to find a job in a month, and that's going to be like a much harder thing to do than if you can plan ahead. I would say the third thing, and it's really important, is like really understanding, what are you going to bring to the table that differentiates from others? Sure, like people look at your LinkedIn and resumes, and that's important too. But once you get in a door and start having a conversations, like what differentiates you? How do you tell your story? How do you tell your story in like a concise manner? Say, try like 5 to 10 minutes. That is like, no matter who you speak with, they understand like what you've done, how do you value yourself and your workplace, what are you going to add like to the company and what they need now. I would practice that pitch, with your friends, with other people. And the fun fact is that I actually practiced my pitch in the past with my mom, who knows nothing about what I do. I think because when you get through an interview process, you might think, oh, I just need to like really understand how to talk to like the hiring manager or the engineering counterpart. But when you're talking to like maybe like somebody in sales, somebody in HR, like not everyone's going to have an understanding of your background. So if you just have a concise pitch at the beginning in layman terms, where people can just understand you, and you can use that over and over again, I think is really important. And so then to answer that question in this current climate, it's tough, I must admit, because especially in startups, I am seeing like people rethinking about full-time hires, thinking about like, even with the current employees, how to make sure like they're thinking through like the urgency of the climate versus what the business needs right now, right, from a company perspective. But I'm not seeing a slowdown of hiring in general across the board. So I would say, tactically speaking, one, making sure that you're looking at companies that have a long runway, especially in the startup world.
Right.
Like at least 12 months plus, I think is really important. once you get into the interview process, or if you like know network, or even just looking at companies that are maybe later stage and doing well, if that's what you're looking for, like job stability. I think two is making sure that during the interview process and your VC setup, like how do you position yourself? Like right now it's like having coffee, like laying back, but like make sure you're like really like leaning in, charismatic, having a conversation with who you're talking to, and making it feel like in person, and you can bring your personality to the table. I think it's really important. So let's just like try to use as much of this setup as possible to still bring yourself to the table. Do that. Like, don't be like, oh, I'm like in this corner in this back. Like, just bring yourself as if like you're right here with me, because like body language matters, as you know that. And then I would say third, tactically speaking, if you are looking right now or sometime soon for product management gigs, I have a Google spreadsheet and form that
great.
out, and I am actively passing this list to, and if you opt in to me sharing your information, just like name, email, LinkedIn, I am actively sharing this list with like VC firms, startups I'm working with, early stage. So if it's something that would be helpful for you, I'm happy to send that around afterwards. And then you can fill out the Google form, and you can also shoot me a LinkedIn message or even an email and see like how I can help more deeply. But I do think that this is like a tactical way for me to help you guys at scale. And I would say the other thing that I do think is key as a candidate to assess out is culture. A lot of times you want to make sure that you're running a good company culture. And how do you assess culture right now where everyone is like virtual? I mean, how you can't go into the office, you're not meeting people in person, you're not getting that team vibe and dynamic.
Right.
And so my suggestion as a candidate on this front is to join in one of their meetings. I would ask that, especially if you're like later stages and you're trying to make a decision. I want to do stand-ups, like see what the team dynamic is like. Like there shouldn't be any harm in that. But you need to assess the culture.
Yeah.
And see like how the team operates. And so maybe a stand-up, maybe it's like sprint planning meeting, maybe just like, I mean, a lot of companies are doing casual coffees and casual happy hours. Can you do one of those, like, and assess culture and see like the different personalities? I think would be key, because right now in the state of things, you're not able to further assess that otherwise. So I would say that's another thing that you should be thinking about doing.
That's a really great suggestion in terms of, asking to be included in some of the team meetings to really understand the culture. Yeah, thank you for all the amazing tips, Yardley. I feel like we can just talk about this for like the entire virtual hangout. Moving along to my next question, and I want to make sure we have enough time for to cover people's questions in the chat room.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, we all made mistakes. And then, when I look at your LinkedIn, I feel like, wow, she just have this amazing career. Like everything seems so perfect. But I'm sure like everybody has their failures and the mistakes. Do you mind sharing with us a career mistake that you made? And maybe like what did you learn from it?
Yeah, I'm happy to actually. And I've talked about this several times. I don't have regrets in life in general, but I do think that there are like mistakes that I've made that I learned from, and this is one that I've learned from. I joined eBay when I was a PM, and so this was like back in, let's just give some context. This was back in, when was that? 2010. It was like a thriving e-commerce at that time. I mean, like eBay today is like so different. But it was a thriving e-commerce. It was like product boot camps, just like, Facebook and other companies have now. I had only been a PM at Dun Bradstreet, which I told you guys it was like 100-year-old company, and I was running P&L. It was amazing. I love to talk about that sometime too, but I ran the entire business line, and it was really, really fun. And I had been an engineer for Apple and Agilent before, and this is a moment where I accepted a job from eBay to move back to Silicon Valley, and being a PM here for the first time.
Right.
And also at that time, product management wasn't as much of a known function. And so I had expected, so let's just go with my expectations. My expectations being PM was running full P&L. That's what I did at Dun Bradstreet, like running full P&L revenue, and being able to hire people just based upon my budget, launching A/B tests and like experiments, having customer facing meetings like all the time. That was my experience, and so that's what I expected. I think what turned out to be a mistake for me here was that it was a product management role, but it was a technical product management role. And so where I was expected to write like technical, like specs, PRDs, working with engineers, there was a whole different function that would do like marketing, go to market, working with customers. There was a whole different function around like revenue, and I had no idea because it wasn't my experience. And I ended up staying in the role for a year because it was just quite limiting in scope than what I had expected. It wasn't a bad product management experience.
Right.
So if I had the right expectations, I think that's where the mistake is. It's not the role and the company that I end up joining that disappointed me. Or that I didn't disappoint them. I left. But I think what happened was just like the mistake is that I wasn't aligned on the expectations of what I had in mind versus the reality. And so I ever since that learning, every new job that I get, I'm just crystal clear on like aligning the expectations of what's on my mind,
Right.
what's real. And I try to get at this in many different ways. So let's like go into the tactics here. So one key question I ask is, what does success look like in this role? And I ask that to almost every single person I meet with. Because ultimately, as a PM, your success is not just depend on the hiring manager. It's the engineering manager counterpart. It's maybe the marketing person. Maybe it's like some other cross-functional. So whoever's interviewing me, they're on the interview panel for a reason, because they're important enough to be on my interview panel. I want to make sure that I understand what they think success looks like in this role. And when you're able to ask every single person that, and at the end of the interview, piece it together, what I do tactically then is like spit it back to the hiring manager. This is what I heard from every person I met with of what success looks like in this role. Does this match your expectations? How do we calibrate that?
What if everybody giving you different answers? Is that a red flag then?
I wouldn't say it's a red flag. I see it as an opportunity to further define the scope and what success looks like with the hiring manager. And the more thought leadership you can bring to the table, the better, right? And it might actually sometimes in some cases bring insights that the hiring manager didn't even know.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that's really important. And then the third thing then is trying to align the expectations is like, all right, what does then like quantitatively does that look like? Give me like a month, a quarter, 6 months, like what does that look like to you? And then in terms of what that spells out, the actual numbers themselves matter, but what matters more is what are the metrics that are being measured? Is it revenue? Is it like speed to launching product? Is it something else? And so then that, where you would need to be playing more of your strengths and what's needed, right? Because ultimately that's what's going to be measured. And furthermore, that will also tell you who are your cross-functional stakeholders that are going to be key.
Mm-hmm.
to work with. And so if it's like revenue, saying like, oh, we're like a startup that's like really trying to like drive this X percent of revenue, and it's going to come from these new products, and that's how we're going to be measured, then you bet the sales team working with the sales team
Mm-hmm.
and customers and like product marketers is going to be key for you. Like you're going to have to make sure that then in your interviews you get to meet someone from sales,
Mm-hmm.
understanding how they work. Are they going to be like how are they going to then contribute to your success, right? Are
Mm-hmm.
they good people that you could work with, even if like current state of processes, communication is not a current state, it's fine. It's just like, are these the people that you feel like you could work with to make it work? That's the key, right? And so I think these three things is like really, really important. And that's what I learned from my mistake that I'm encouraging you guys to not repeat. And so that's why I think it's really important for us to discuss. Making
Yeah.
sure you're setting, aligning expectations as much as possible before you start.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Wow. Thank you so much. That's definitely a very valuable lesson for all of us to learn and make sure that we align with the key stakeholders' expectations and make sure we ask the right questions and make sure we understand what does key success look like in the new role. So I think a lot of people are interested in your angel investing.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's just generally talk about it, and we'll get into some of the questions that people
Okay.
ask in the chat room.
Angel investing.
Yeah, what do you like about it? Why did you decide to transition, I guess, from a full-time product leader to angel investment?
I would say I got into angel investing because of Woman Product.
Mm.
So when we started with this idea in May 2016 at a dinner about, throwing a women product management conference, I don't know if everyone knows the story, but maybe I can just tie this.
Share with us.
So in May 2016, a few of us got together at dinner, just a networking dinner, and shared our journeys about getting into product management. And we realized that, we each had a very different journey, and we wanted to, create a community. But it wasn't so much like, oh, we're going to start an organization. It was more like, hey, let's put together a conference. And so we got Facebook to give us a space for 300 people in September 2016. And I was in charge of putting together the website, which was Squarespace up until recently. I know we awesome. And getting speakers. And when we actually launched a website in July, we have 4,000 women signed up in a week from all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew that there was demand there. And so after the conference, we officially formed a 501c3 in January 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And what I didn't recognize was that there'd be so many female founders in an organization. And so a lot of founders reached out to me, I would say like in early 2017 for advice, help, because a lot of founders are the product builders themselves. And so I fell in love with helping them and working with them. And I recognize, like we all recognize now, that, a lot of it comes down to funding. And, I think angel investing is something that I still really love doing today. And I would say for those that are thinking about starting and going into it, just do it. Like there's no curriculum. There's no like, oh, like, let me check all these boxes and like make the best decision I can.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go into it assuming you're not going to get your money back. I mean, like it's not like like, let me like invest in this and from an ROI perspective, like you would like maybe if you're an institutional investor. As an angel investor, you're betting on the founding team. You're betting on the idea and the market size that they will win.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's like largely it. And I think for me, from an angel investing perspective, for the last, I guess, 4 years, it has been quite a journey because originally I had the mindset of like, oh, I really want to get everything's right. And so I want to make like good bets. But then I realized over time that if if you look at all the investments I made, the best high performing companies are the ones where I believe in the founders, believe that they have grit to make it through, because companies will pivot. They're going to have to change directions. It doesn't matter. It's like you're believing on the people very early on. And I'm speaking investing in a pre-seed and seed stage. I mean, you already have a little bit more traction, so that's different. But I love being able to help the founders in this way. And I would say now, looking back on my investments, too, I definitely have over indexed on underrepresented founders, not just females, but maybe like founders that have never had tech experience and they're trying to build like a tech startup, or like they're exploring like ideas because of their family backgrounds have never been done in the US and they've done it in other countries. Like I am trying to, I guess for me, for angel investing, my objective is really trying to help the founders and nothing else. And so if that's the mindset I have, then all the investment decisions I'm making is to bet on founders that will make it, but the mindset and lens that is like people that are usually not given a shot, not to even have the conversations with investors. Because that's where it's a huge struggle for a lot of founders. And, obviously with my background, I do specialize particularly like in real estate, tech, fintech, health and wellness. And I'm very interested in the future of work, because how we live, how we work, how do we pay for things, and it's all intertwined. And I do think a lot about go-to-market strategies. So I would say, aside for looking at founders and the TAM and the market size, as product managers, please do not just like overcritical, like analyze their products, like and thinking about that. Think a lot more about the go-to-market strategies. If it's a consumer play, how are they going to acquire consumers? How are they going to grow? If it's an enterprise play, do they have like a way to sell into enterprises and make that happen? Because like, you have to think beyond the core product itself. It's like, how does this core product go to people? Like, how does that go? I think that's the biggest thing, because like a lot of times you can find friends and family to test your product early on, but how does it scale beyond that? And what's the go-to-market strategies and distribution channels? I would really try to analyze those things, because our minds would naturally go to the product, but go beyond that, I think it's going to be key.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. So I have seen a lot of questions now from the chat room. So let me get to those. So I saw one question I think it's very relevant. How does one deal with the case where some managers are micromanaging and driving their teams crazy? How would you suggest building trust in a virtual work situation?
Particularly micromanagers. I think actually in any management situation, here's what I recommend. One, making sure that you have the weekly check-ins to really discuss and set expectations on what's coming up. Rather it's like, hey, I'm going to hit these certain milestones in a month, or I'm going to make sure I prioritize on these three things the next week. Two, making that the collaborative document. I love Google Docs. I have like a Google Doc with every single one-on-one I have, because it allows for like, hey, this is exactly what we discussed. And here we're collaborating on this together. Like last week I said I would prioritize these three things, but if we need to, because of XYZ changed my priorities, this is now what we're going to align on for the next priorities, like going forward. And into particularly the situation with micromanagement, I would ask how he or she wants to be involved. Like what, try to probe into a little bit more as to like, what is the involvement that gets he or she motivated and interested? Is it like, is he nervous that if you don't get the requirements locked and loaded by April 1st, engineers can't start working on it? So he's like trying to like make sure every single day you're like on task. So, and if that's the case, like I would say, great, like I totally appreciate the help. Like always position it as like, I appreciate the help, But I would love it if you can give me like 1 day or 2 days to work on this. Happy to send you back like the update and let's calibrate to see where we are. I think
Mhm.
like setting expectations of what you're going to get done within like certain defined moment and then calibrating and getting the feedback,
Mhm.
the expectation up front is what you really need to do.
Mhm.
So it's like twofold, right? One, understanding where the micromanagement is coming from. And it might be that he or she is getting pressure from above on certain things that you might
Right.
be aware of. So
Mhm.
try to understand and always like speak with like empathy, right? And relatability. It's like, hey, I love the help. I'm just really trying to understand like where is it coming from? Like,
Mhm.
is it certain things that I'm missing your expectations in certain areas? Is it like certain external pressures that I might be unaware of? Like, where is that?
Mhm.
And then formulate the plan for setting expectations and time frame to check,
Mhm.
right? And so once you're giving him that
Mhm.
and assuming you're meeting expectations, then
Mhm.
it should be okay. Then you
Right.
should be able to like have less micromanagement, like on top of you. But it's being able to proactively and take this into your own hands,
Right.
able to set expectations back.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think it's important.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is this concept I heard about managing up. So it's not only managing down, but also it's important to managing your own boss in a way, right? Like trying to align the key
Yeah,
expectations.
I mean,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, what I have found from micromanagers in particular is just that there there's either something around like missed expectations between you and that person,
Mhm.
right? And like so it's trying to like more frequently check in, or two, there are like external pressures that's like making like him or she to like really want to hone in on this area
Mhm.
and like really working with you on it. I mean, everyone's busy. Like no one should like feel like micromanagement, like nobody wants to check in all the time. So there's like a source of reason, like you need to find out why and then like try to set a plan accordingly.
Mhm. Awesome. Here's another question. As a junior PM, sometimes you find that you're really a project manager. What soft skills and hard skills do you think you can and should develop to avoid this?
Yeah, I think this comes up a lot, right? Like a lot of companies don't have project managers, so like PMs end up being that.
The
I
project.
would just
Mhm.
try to time box like how much you're doing it.
Mm.
Undoubtedly, like, there's a portion of time of bandwidth that you are doing it. It's just like how much you're doing it and how much you need to do it. I
Mhm.
sometimes I would go on it, I guess like Hmm, soft skills and hard skills. I would say my assumption for this question is that you don't really love doing it and you don't want to do it 100% of the time. So how do you like set expectations accordingly? So maybe I will reframe the question a little bit. So if that's the case and my assumption is correct, then I would say one, where is the need from project management coming from? Is it like uh project management in terms of setting like sales expectations and go to market, or is it project management like on the engineering team and scrum teams, and or is it just from like um getting like cross-functional stakeholders to work together, or is it working with an external partner and setting expectations accordingly? Like there's just so many different ways of doing project management, and I
Mhm.
would just lean in on the cross-functional stakeholders to do their part
Mhm.
as possible in any of these situations. uh,
Mhm.
and sometimes, especially with engineering, I would say making sure that you're holding like engineering managers and leaders accountable to giving you an update on certain things. Maybe like every Friday morning, I want an update on like how this is like going. And that's when I'm going to get input from you.
Mhm.
And then I could say maybe then at the end of the Friday, I can then send out my update, on where we are with things to whoever needs to know.
Mhm.
Sometimes like project management is really about bringing visibility to others. And so if you're able to, whoever you need like input from to like put your project plan together and update on a regular basis, I would just hold that stakeholder accountable to give you something on a regular frequency that you agree upon, and then you set out your update your project plan after that. So you're not like all week trying to like pull in all these more people, trying to like update it all the time. I would say that's key. And then I would say in that regard, also hoping that if you have a sound project plan at the beginning of the quarter after you've done roadmap, then it's like less work as you iterate on it to get like, you know, in subsequent like weeks or months.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that holding cross-functional stakeholders like responsible and
Mm-hmm.
trying to set expectations on when you'll be updating the project plan and sharing that visibility is like important to keep sane.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're just doing it like all day, all week long on like random times and days of the week.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. So here's another question. Hi, Yardley. I'm wondering if you have any tips regarding industry switching. I do believe PM skills are transferable. I'm not sure how to convince others and not myself that I'm capable of learning the domain knowledge, as that seems to be a conversation killer. So,
I mean, yes, I understand that. But I would push back on that a little bit because
mhm,
I've definitely hired PMs, and my own journey have also gone into industries where I didn't need to know the domain knowledge, rather it was
right.
risk management or like real estate or something like that. I think trying to understand why the company is looking for this expertise, and then secondly, are there experts within the company that you can pick their brain? Like during the interview process, if it's like, oh, I need to make sure that I have a PM in healthcare and really understand healthcare because we're a healthcare tech startup. I would say, well, then great. Who are the stakeholders within the company that I could talk to discuss this a bit more and try to
Mhm,
pick their brain? And then when you talk to the expert or expertise, like, all right, like sounds like you know everything about healthcare. Where do you see like this PM needs to know about healthcare to make sound decisions? Is it like product ideation? Is it around like coming up with like understanding like who are the payers in this space? And so that's why we need to like build products accordingly. Like which area do you think like this like healthcare expertise really need to be leaned upon from a product management perspective? That
mhm,
would be good to know.
mhm,
I would just push back and really dig in and then trying to really understand where the needs are and then being able to showcase like how you would ramp up like in those areas, right?
mhm,
Accordingly. I think of course every case is different, but I would really try to understand where that expertise is needed, particularly to this role,
mhm,
and get as concise as possible and then coming up with responses of how you will learn and get there.
mhm, mhm,
Because I think it's just too generic to say like, oh, I need someone from healthcare. Why? You know?
mhm. Yeah, great. We have a few more questions here. So, hi Yardley, I'm from San Jose. I work for women in product in the past. Thank you. How do I focus on job search given some of the hiring freeze going on and also taking care of a 2-year-old at home?
Yeah, I guess it goes back to job search and like work
Right.
immigration. This is
Mm-hmm.
where I think it's really important to tap into networks.
Right.
I know it's hard, and everyone always asks me like, "Oh, networking is so hard. It's so awkward. Like, what does that look like? What does that even mean?" I mean, I think, look, everyone is vulnerable right now. Like everyone's feeling very open and vulnerable, I think, because of
Mm-hmm.
everything that's going on. And so I would just say, like, as much as possible, don't be afraid to cold email people on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Try to be like on social and be like transparent about like where you need help. Tap into the network that you might have around like job searches. Like I think this
Mm-hmm.
is also where woman product could really help. I mean, we still have a lot of
Exactly.
companies paying us for jobs, and we try to really showcase the job board and send out like the newsletters. There may be like more we could do here in this area to support you guys through this time. So we'll definitely be getting feedback about like post this coffee chat. So as specific as you can share with us, like how we can help you. through this time. We want to. This is like the whole purpose of having this chat.
Mhm.
I mean, I think my Google spreadsheet could be like a way, Google form, and I'll continue to do that. But how can we better serve you guys in this time? I think would be helpful too. Um, I guess like, look, it's true. It's not transparent, like which companies are freezing right now. No clue. But
Mhm.
just assume they're not and see and how it goes. Ultimately, at the end of the day, like we don't know how long this is gonna last. Even with companies that are job freezing, I know that plenty are still interviewing PMs because they don't know if this is like a few weeks from now, few months, like, they don't know. And so when like they see good candidates, they're not going to pause. So don't be afraid. Like just really go out there and be confident about yourself. I think it's really important.
Mhm.
And let us know. Like, I mean, we're looking at like a lot of the posts like in the Facebook, in the woman product Facebook group, like lean on each other. Like I'm happy to be more involved there if that's helpful and jump in, and so we can keep this conversation going. But I would say leaning into this community, one, telling us how we could help you tactically would be great, and we'll try to do as much as we can, noting that we obviously also very strapped in our organization. But two, leveraging the Facebook group and be transparent. Don't be afraid to speak up and like see how each other can help you. um,
Mhm.
and I can personally make a commitment of being more active in that group as well and jumping in when you guys post, so you can have that personal commitment from me. um and then I would say third, like tapping into your network as much as possible. I think it's really important.
Just a quick time check, Yardley. So it's almost 12 o'clock,
Yeah.
but we are seeing quite many questions and then comments here. Are you okay with being like extending it a little bit?
Yeah, let me just let my 12 o'clock know really quickly. But yeah, let's like give another 5 minutes if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. Actually, I'm seeing some of the questions regarding pivoting product roadmap and then product direction in this particular time. So there's one comment about a company provides event photography services. So given the short-term dip, we are looking at small product changes in the packaging to extend value to customers to increase dollars per sale. Any advice on how far to go down on this path? So I guess it's really about how to assess uncertain situation, which will then change your product roadmap accordingly.
Hmm. I think that's a good question. I mean, everyone's facing it right now. I mean, unless there are companies that are doing exceedingly well during this period. Um, I think not to just with the specific example, I think in general, like one is checking back in with your manager and also understanding like, hey, and if you're on a leadership team, great. If you're not, checking with your manager, hey, like what are some goals for us like over the next few weeks with this changing climate? Like how can
Mm-hmm.
we pitch in to help? Like what is like going to be the most important thing that we do right now? Like forget the roadmap, like just forget, just take like a way step back and understand like from a company perspective, like where are we struggling as a company? Like what help is like being made there right now? Like how can we help from a product tech perspective? I think that would be like, one. And then secondly, once you get the answers to that, then you can think about, well, how can we scrappily do something, or are there like real trade-offs that need to be made? Because at the end of the day, like it is really tying back to business outcomes, especially if you're thinking about this changing climate. The end users might be changing much too. Like if you're, especially in the event space, it is tough. Like you're not having like real person get-togethers, but there's still the virtual space. You can still like what we're doing. There's also still like maybe other products that you can offer in advance that's like more like online, in lieu of this time. Just trying to get creative of how you can think about helping. I think it's going to be important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Being flexible is key, because like there's no way that we can all stick to our like pre-planned roadmaps to what was before, and being that willingness to pitch in and help and being flexible, I think will speak volume.
Awesome. Cool. We are also getting a lot of suggestions for our future virtual hangout. Thank you so much for everyone for your advice and the suggestion. I hope you enjoy this session. Do you have any final tips, Yardley, for women who want to have their voices heard and have a seat on the table? And then we will end there.
I think having confidence is key. I know it's hard. We're all like, having confidence is key, and not being afraid to like ask for what you want. I think oftentimes, like, especially women, I speak to that too. Like, it's just hard. Like, you're kind of nervous. Cause like, I mean, I see those situations today, but you don't ask, you don't know what you're going to get. And I still think that's very true. It's just the manner of how you ask it, you know, really how you convey, your ask, and trying to make sure you balance to strike between like seemingly overly arrogant and like a lot versus like, hey, I believe in myself. And so tactically speaking, what I've found works is, one, when you think you're going to negotiations and asking for something that might be like a little bit like out there, I would say, one, really understanding like the person that you're going to be speaking to, like where's the incentives and motivations to try to make this work for you. And then two, having some benchmarking is helpful, especially speaking about numbers, and making sure that you have some data around it. That's important. I think it's like, just don't be afraid to like lean in, ask for what you want. I think it's key, but speaking in a factual manner, empathetically, understanding like it might be like, you know, an overstretched ask, but this is what will really make me motivated and happy in this job, and helping you further, you know, in this role. Like those kinds of things, like that kind of language is important, rather than coming off like, hey, I want this for myself and myself only. But it's more like, how can you help me be better at my job and be more motivated, and then help you further, you know, as well. I think it's like tying those talking points together and conveying that, and that message, I think is always important, in any sort of context when you're trying to ask for something.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yardley, for spending the time with us. And then thank you so much, Rachel. And then thanks everyone for joining. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Talk to you later. Bye.